Welcome to the Performance Enhancing Podcast. It's like steroids for your brain. A podcast for people looking to live life at their peak potential. Chock full of real-world tools and knowledge that you can apply in your life today. By providing you with a lens into the lives, beliefs, practices, and actions of those who are already living extraordinary lives, the Performance Enhancing Podcast will help you shift your mindset or create that change in your daily rituals and habits so you can explode with success in the areas of life that are most important to you. So get ready for another dose of Performance Enhancing Podcast with SatoriPrime. Here's your host, Ilan Ferdman.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Performance Enhancing Podcast with your host, Ilan Ferdman. Have a really special show, or the next two sessions are going to be obviously very special. I got a chance to interview probably the most accomplished business person that we've ever had on this show. His name is Samit, and he just came out with a book called Disrupt You. It's a funny story, which you'll hear about on how we actually connected. But just to give you an idea of how accomplished, Jay actually started in the music publishing world, working with artists like Aerosmith, Ozzy Osbourne, Peter Gabriel, Metallica. He was one of the first people to create Laserdisc and CD-ROM titles that we then listened to on our personal computers, including the first video on a PC. He was constantly merging technology with music. You'll hear a story. He actually was in the room when Napster told them what they were up to and what they were about to release. And then he turned that education into more of a marketing advertising platform where he worked as a CEO for Social Vibe, and they worked with top brands like Microsoft, Visa, Apple, Disney, Coca-Cola, Kia, Macy's, Nestle, Procter & Gamble, just to name a few. It's just unbelievable what this man has been able to accomplish. And in this book, Disrupt You, it's kind of his pep talk to the world about what's coming down the pike. He's gotten a chance to help start companies like eBay, LinkedIn. He's worked with people like Bill Gates, Richard Branson. So he really understands what's happening down the road and in the future. And he's a huge believer that entrepreneurs will solve the world's problems. And I just absolutely loved the opportunity to learn from this man. So a couple of things we're going to cover in part one is his 3-step process to change. And by that, we're going to talk about mindset, career, and then how to disrupt public institutions, how to change your assumptions about your life, those that aren't true, and how to figure out which ones those are. Every successful business solves a problem. So a lot of times people struggle with, well, what kind of business would I start? He's going to give you an amazing little tool that he teaches his students on how you can come up with incredible business ideas. And one of my favorite lines that he says is, you only have to be right for one day to be a billionaire. So I hope you really take this on. The man is just full of wisdom and knowledge, and I'm sure you'll enjoy this as much as I did. All right, welcome everyone. So I'm thrilled and honestly flattered to have this guest on our show today. His name is Samit, and funny little story before I introduce him. We actually posted something on Twitter. Jay had commented, it was the top 20 books for entrepreneurs to read. And Jay wrote a sarcastic comment like, 21 is my favorite. To which I responded, which is that? You said Disrupt You. And then I responded, who wrote it? And you said, well, I did. And that's kind of how the relationship started. And we spoke after that. So I kind of hounded him, and then, he's finally here and he's about to do this huge book launch, which I think everyone should read. But Jay, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Quick question. You read the book?
Yes.
Did you learn from it?
I absolutely learned from it, and I'm happy to introduce that learning to others right now.
Terrific.
Yeah. So let's start with that. Why write this book?
So I've been very lucky and very fortunate. You go out in the world, you start companies, they become billion-dollar companies. Friends start companies, they become billion-dollar companies. And you can either say, wow, we're special, we're smart, we're different. Or you can say, wow, here's what we learned. Here's how we can make the journey easier for others. Because if I get on my soapbox, my way of paying it forward is I look at a world with tremendous challenges. And the only people that ever solve problems are entrepreneurs. whether it's global warming, whether it's anything. And when I look at things like what's happened in Baltimore, what's happened in Ferguson, what's happening with ISIS, I don't see race and religion. What I see is massive unemployment for those under 30. That's probably the most destabilizing thing we see. In the U.S., we have the millennial generation, 80 million coming up, the largest we've ever faced. Globally, it's 2.3 billion. And unless we teach people to disrupt the way they think about the world and how they can be successful, we're going to have huge problems on our hands. So it's selfish because I want the world to be a better place, but it wasn't easy, but I'm not a genius. I'm not different than anybody else. I didn't come from the right side of the tracks. I didn't have some special education. Daddy wasn't rich. It's really, here's what we learned, here's how you can do it, and here's how easy it is to be successful and thrive in this era.
So tell a little bit about your background and how you gain this information. Because before we get into the book, I think it's always important that people understand who they're hearing information from. So
much like many today, I got out of college at a time of a recession. There weren't any jobs, and you had to do something. You got to eat. So I printed up business cards and made up the name of a company and realized I could call on people that would never visit the company. And I had a computer background, which was unusual in the late 1970s, to be on the internet in the late 1970s. The world came to the crazy place I was, not the other way around. And once you have that taste of success, you can build a company and make a ton of mistakes and not be afraid to make more mistakes. I created the first auction on the internet. Pierre, who did all the hard work, turned that into a thing called eBay. Worked with Reid Hoffman, the smartest man I've ever worked with, that turned into LinkedIn. And you can go on. And over the course of my career, is getting to work with people like David Geffen and Steven Spielberg and Richard Branson, and these amazing people. And then I've been the big suit and tie. I'm a public CEO right now of Sea Change International, but I've been a senior global officer of companies like Sony and EMI and Universal, trying to disrupt their way of being in business, changing the music industry from buying round things to having streaming services and subscriptions and downloads. All those were first that we pioneered. And so you see a pattern. And the pattern is no one ever got to the top following somebody else. No one got there without making a ton of mistakes. Bill Gates and Paul Allen's first company went bankrupt. Their second company was Microsoft. Henry Ford didn't have success. He had 3 bankruptcies before Ford Motor in his 50s. So it's never too late. And here's the thing. You might want to take that safe bet. You're going to go for the big company. You're going to get the gold watch. You're going to work for 20 years. Well, guess what? 60 years ago, they came up with the term Fortune 500, the 500 biggest companies in the world. Only 57 of them are still standing, which means the odds that you'll be there for that watch, there is no security. Security doesn't rob ambition. The illusion of security robs ambition. So whether by choice or by plan, you'll be disrupted.
Yeah.
So you need to continue to grow your skill sets. And so this book, Disrupt You, is divided into 3 parts. First, everybody talks about changing the world, but nobody talks about changing themselves. You have to take off all the shackles that you've been told since you were yay high. You can't do this. You're not good at this. Guess what? It's not true.
Yeah.
The universe is limitless. So are you. Second, third is how to change your career. So you could stay in your company and disrupt from the inside. You could start your own company. There's different places in the value chain of business that you can capture disruption. I give endless examples and the generosity of all these other successful people. And you don't have to be technology. It could be a restaurant. It could be making a toy, shoes. I mean, there's some wacky examples in the book. And then the last third is for those people who have succeeded in business and still want to give back. How do you disrupt public institutions, government institutions? I was asked by the President of the United States, could I get a computer to every classroom in the U.S.? And I said, yes. And we did it in 18 months without $1 taxpayer money.
Wow.
Every classroom to be an equalizer. So everybody would have equal access to knowledge. So anybody has opportunity. You can watch a cat playing the piano, or you can create Airbnb. The choice is yours.
Yeah. And you know what I find fascinating is if you program your brain to seek information online, the world is limitless. And I'm talking from the simplest things. Like I use this example. I had white soled shoes that, after wearing once or twice were black. And I was like, man, I paid good money for them. Now they're done. And then I thought, I bet you YouTube would give me this solution. And I literally went in word for word, how do you clean white-soled shoes? And within a minute, I had white-soled shoes again. And I think everything is accessible today if we train ourselves to seek it. And I think for most people, that's why I love the book. It's can't sit on your laurels and think, okay, I'm an engineer and this is what I know and I will be in this job forever. I think you're putting a flashlight on the fact that the world in 5 years will no longer be the same world we are looking at today. And if you don't alter your education, you don't alter what you are capable of, I don't know what's going to be left of those people.
Well, here's a real simple example. You want to go to a doctor who's about my age, doctor in their 50s, right? Their experience. You're sitting there, wow, what if that doctor had learned nothing since med school? In 30 years, 100% of the drugs on the market today didn't exist when he was in school.
Yeah.
If that doctor didn't keep learning, you'd be dead.
Exactly.
So it's the same for your career. And a career is like a long trip, just a whole lot more baggage that you got to take. And self-disruption is really looking at where you need to add and where you need to change. And as I like to say, self-disruption is like doing plastic surgery, except you're holding a scalpel. And in Disrupt You, what I was able to see from people is it's not so much that people have all the pieces, and that's what stops a lot of people from starting. They have an idea of where it's heading, and it's the journey that you learn to fill out the pieces. My friend Reid Hoffman says an entrepreneur is somebody that jumps off a cliff and assembles the plane on the way down. And I think that's a great metaphor.
Let me play devil's advocate here for a second, okay? I'm going to use my dad here as an example. He's a longtime listener, so hopefully he doesn't get upset by what I'm about to say. For people that are older,
yep,
you associate your profession, your job, and especially I think in this country, if you've ever heard culture code, our job, our craft is tied to our identity. And for a lot of people, the concept of I need to do something new or I need to alter this, aside from the fact that it's scary, let's just leave that as a given. Right. There's so much identity tied in with that they might hear it as you saying something like, be someone else.
No, it's remember who you were and not who you were told you couldn't be. So, great example. I ran some of the world's largest music labels. So EMI, Sony, BMG, and all of a sudden there were people who spent 20, 30 years getting songs onto radio or getting videos onto MTV. Or getting and marketing, positioning in record stores, how records were sold. And when they lost their jobs, they couldn't go to another record label. The entire industry disappeared.
Yeah.
It all went digital. So what happens? All these marketing people are just supposed to go and say, I sell records, I'm dead. If they break down what their skill set is, and they say, wait a second, the guy who sells Coca-Cola, he has 100 years of people knowing about Coke and just has to remind you. A guy who sells a new band has to take 3 kids in a garage that you didn't know about and make sure that on Tuesday when the record drops, you've heard about them.
Yeah.
What an amazing skill set. So take out the word record. Who else needs that? What if I take undifferentiated earbuds, a utility that we all buy for nothing? And what if I go and do the same methodology, flip some envelopes here and there? So when the cameras go on everybody at the Olympics, walking to the pool about to jump in, every athlete from every country is wearing Beats headphones that is not a sponsor of the Olympics and didn't pay for the $1 billion worth of coverage. And that's how you make a $1 billion company, by disrupting your limitations and changing. And it happens again and again. I'll give you one of my favorite examples in the book. Have you ever missed an airplane flight?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Or the flight gets canceled. You're sitting around an airport. Yep. And you'll look at it today. And I fly all over the world speaking. We're all sitting there helpless. Well, Richard looked around and said, wait a second. All these people counted to the math of his head, went to find out how much it was to just charter a plane. He was stuck in Puerto Rico, needed to get to the Virgin Islands. Writes a little sign, holds up the sign, Virgin Airways, and he and his girlfriend got to fly for free. That is how a non-college educated music industry guy launches an airline.
Yep.
Richard's done this 8 times, built $8 billion companies in completely different industries with no formal pedigree. But he thinks like a disruptor.
See a need, fill a need.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that. Because in the book, that's really the highlight of this is the ability to disrupt. And it was interesting. It was like I had read Bold by Peter Diamandis, and then this was almost another cut of this whole thing. And what I like that you did is you talked about the disruption of self in that mix. He kind of just spoke about this big out there world that's happening.
Well, you hit on it so important. Peter was generous to write one of the quotes on the book, and a dear, bright guy. But you can't go changing the world if you have the same assumptions of what you can and cannot do.
Yes.
And I go into this at length. And on a personal level, I'll give you my failure. So my dear mom, who hopefully doesn't listen to this, wanted me out of the house faster. So she forged my birth certificate and made me a year older. That got her rid of me at 4 years old, but it meant for the rest of my school years, I would be the smallest, least coordinated, least athletic kid, right? I hated sports. I avoided it. By the time I got to 8th grade, where it's sanctioned school wrestling, or you get to beat up Jay, I could have both shoulders on the mat before the other kid touched me, okay? So I grew up not liking sports because I was told I was bad at sports. It was a negative experience. I don't follow any professional games. I don't watch sports to this day. And I realized once I became, around 40 and I was really, looking at stuff, I said, I have this negative attitude because I was told something that isn't true. At that moment in history, I was weak or smaller, but I'm not 40. So why not now learn a sport, do something, and shake off what I was told I couldn't do? And for me, the highlight, as bizarre as it was learning to trapeze. Yeah, pretty insane. The first time you jump off, 30 feet up in the air and you go, oh boy, what am I doing? But anybody can do it. And that's the whole point, is we have no limitations. There is no job that needs 100% of the brain's potential. There is no job that somebody else did learn how to do. You don't have to follow all the same steps. And you don't have to learn everything. You can learn what your unique skill is. You can surround and backfill. There's no giant company that's run by one person and no one else is working it out.
So how would you suggest people find said skill? Because I know we coach thousands of people, and a lot of people struggle with, we tell them, we'll help you build a passion-based business. And their natural question is, well, how do I find out what my passion is?
I would give your listeners two gifts. The first is how to do that, and the second is a tool to help them do it. Every successful business solves a problem. It's as simple as that. So if you have no problems in your life, you have no ability to be an entrepreneur. We all have problems. And I teach at the largest engineering university in the US. And I ask my students for 30 days, write down 3 problems they come across in their lives. First couple of days, it's easy. By the end of the month, you're really starting to study. But by the end of the month, you have 90 ideas.
Wow.
That's more than any VC gets to see in a month. So one of them could be traffic. You go, wait a second, traffic's horrible. But the cell tower knows where my phone is and knows where the other guy's phone is. If it told me to make a left and him to make a right, well, that's waves, okay? Yep. You didn't have to be the engineer to solve that, okay? You just had to identify the problem and find the engineering talent. And this is how every business starts. Getting away from technology. Clay, a guy I was on a board with and worked with, a very smart man. Look, the dogs were no longer tied up in the backyard. People had them in their house. So what? That's not a farm animal. That's a family member. You would pay more to feed a family member healthy food. So he set out to make a healthy premium dog food. The wholesale cost for his dog food was more than the retail for the competition. Competition laughed at him. He got no investors, did it all himself. 100% owned the thing. Until the day when Procter & Gamble did the largest acquisition in the history of their company and bought Ives dog food. So it's not just technology, it's find the problem and solve for it. Solve for others to solve for you.
Very, very smart. And then how would that tie into someone's passion? So if I'm a dog lover, I can see that, right? Because my eyes focused on dog. If I'm an IT person or HR person, right? And I hate my job. I hate my boss. I hate walking into work. How do I find out what I'm passionate? How do I find about an arena in which I'm passionate that I can make a difference?
So you have that list of 90 ideas.
Okay.
Some you're like, God, I got toenail fungus. Doesn't really excite me to spend a lot of time thinking about toenails, whatever it might be. But on that, you're going to come up with something that you think is both affects a lot of people and something that you grow the passion as you realize you have an answer. And the interesting thing is, as you get on that journey, most businesses pivot. Most businesses pivot after they've raised money. So it's not like, oh, I had this fully formed eureka moment, like, Doc Brown in Back to the Future. It's like, I really think there's something here. And what if I explore it? And then when you get in there, you're the only one actually creating data and knowledge to know where there's a business. So I just did a radio show in Los Angeles with a guy who was passionate about dogs. He walked dogs to make money during college, and he's now launched the Uber of dog walking. So people can get it in 3 major cities, anytime, whatever. And we laughed. He raised millions and millions of dollars because there's millions and millions of dogs and no one has scaled it. So it really is as simple as just, who can I solve a problem for? How big is that audience? And then what I talked about in Disrupt You is it's not just figuring out how to disrupt, but value capture. When Sean and Sean created Napster, I was one of the first people they came to see. And I knew nothing would be the same for the music industry again, but I also knew they'd never make a dime from it because they released value without capturing the value. So part of it is to try to figure out what you can defend, own, and do. And if you look at the biggest disruption of modern day businesses, the largest retailer in the world has no inventory. It's Alibaba. The largest content company in the world creates no content. That's Facebook. The largest hotel chain in the world, the most nights of guests, is Airbnb. They own no things. The largest taxi company owns no cars, Uber. So what do these have in common? So just eBay. They created a marketplace and they gathered the customers, and they're in between the dollars and everybody else. And it's that easy. You're one click away on your phone from 6 billion people. You only have to be right for one day to be a billionaire. It's that easy.
So well said. It's interesting when you put all those big companies into perspective, because Uber is now in everyone's face. And I love that everyone's kind of trying to Uber everything, right? It's like, how do I Uber this and how do I Uber that, which I think is really clever. But they just tapped into something that ties all this technology and makes it simple enough to use. And I like how you pointed out all these other companies. I never really thought that, yeah, Facebook is really the largest content provider and they create none of it on their own. It's pretty incredible. I'm just curious, your reaction to Sean when he walked into the office and dropped Napster on your table. Were you thinking, oh shit, I'm not going to be in a job any longer? Were you thinking this is the future, this is dumb?
So I knew it was inevitable. The music fit through the pipes. So music was the first guinea pig canary in the mine shaft. And he did it what people used to do by, literally what we call sneaker net, downloading files and, taking them to somebody else and ripping stuff. He automated it. So I knew that was inevitable, but I sat there with him and said, okay, what's the business model? How can we turn this into a business? And as I heard later, and it was written in another book, when they got outside the door, they arrogantly were like, oh, we're going to own all the labels within a couple of years. So the other thing you have to realize that Uber's facing this right now and Airbnb's facing this is the laws don't move at the same speed as technology. So some things that you may invent may run afoul of laws. Tesla, greatest car ever made. Everybody agrees. Elon's a fantastic visionary disruptor. But most states have laws that don't allow a manufacturer to sell their own cars. That was long from 100 years ago to protect these franchise dealerships from the big three, and now it stops innovation. Elon's big enough to say, those laws aren't protecting the consumer. I will fight them. Mark Cuban got big enough when the IRS said, wait a second, and they were wrong. He said, I'm not going to roll over, and he won. So change in Washington move at different paces, and I spent an awful lot of time in depositions dealing with that challenge. But the neat thing is there's so much that is changing so fast. So who owns the community of people making 3D models for 3D printers? No one's done that yet. Who really owns the Internet of Things? All the new devices that will make our lives so much easier? No one. So any one of your listeners could take a piece of that business. For me, my first company, I was looking at desktop publishing, the Mac had just come out, and people were able to make, newsletters and stuff on a computer. It sounds like every day nowadays, but it was revolutionary. Computers before that were just words, text machines. And I'm like, wait a second. The next thing's going to be everyone's going to do video and everyone's going to do audio. And where are they going to get all that stuff? I'll make all these CD-ROMs filled with this stuff so that people can do it. It wasn't an engineering feat. It was just staying a little ahead of where things are going. Now I'm in a different stage of my career where everybody asks me, how can I always know the next thing? Because I hang out with the people that create the future. I don't need the ball. I know who they are. I watch the patents that they're filing, but I look at it differently. What will surprise your listeners is scientists, research universities, engineers, for the most part, are not business people.
Yeah.
They're creating a pure thing in a vacuum with no idea what to do with it. And it took me literally 15 years of my career to have this epiphany. I'm like, wait a second. They just spent $100 million to make X, and they have no idea what to do with it. Yes. So if you can come up with something to do with it, you benefit from that $100 million that you didn't have to spend.
So are you guys getting the power of this man, how by the virtue of what he's been able to accomplish and who he's been able to work with and what he's been able to work on, how he's just learned this amazing process of always looking ahead of what's coming down the pike, merging that with the world's problems and figuring out how technology can solve those problems. And by virtue of doing that, has kind of stayed ahead of the curve and been this Lone Ranger. So in this book, and we'll get more into the intricacies in part 2, but in this book, he's going to show you how you can become that kind of disruptor. First, you have to disrupt yourself. Then you can go out and disrupt these type of industries and these kind of niches. So make sure you come back and check out part 2, where we delve much deeper into the book. So I hope you've enjoyed this, part 1. And until we speak again, have an amazing, amazing day, my friends.
Thank you for joining us on this week's Performance Enhancing Podcast. We've taken this pep talk and created a custom action guide so you know exactly what action steps to take now to grow your business. Just head over to SatoriPrime.com/podcast and download it for free. Also, please leave a comment and rate this podcast on iTunes. It'll help us get the word out. Thanks for listening. Now, go and implement. We'll see you next time.
Did you run through doors?